gratitude in the last few years has really been headlined as being a powerful force in health. It was always seen, gratitude was always the right thing to do, to say thank you, to appreciate those that have helped us, those that have paid prices, whether it's from parents, siblings, educators, or just strangers. But now, science has demonstrated how it actually helps a person be healthier, more pleasant, happier, live longer. I recently saw an interesting video, which was what at least they claimed, and I hope it's accurate, that they did a blind type of video for getting a group of different individuals, not as a group, individually, people of different walks of life, who've gone through different challenges in life, some with a pleasant disposition, others more dark and depressed. And the exercise they did, and they videoed the people doing it, was very fascinating. They asked them to write down who in their lives they would like to thank. And it could be someone that goes years back that helped them in some way. And ask them to write a letter to that person, thanking them. That was step one. So you have them writing the letter. The next thing, which these individuals did not know what was coming next, they said, let's find that person. In some cases it was a parent, in some cases it was an educator, in some cases it was people that were complete strangers, and they had to do research, and they found the numbers of all these individuals, and they had this person actually call them. Some were a little hesitant, but everyone cooperated finally. Some they got through immediately. I guess this video was only ones they got through. And they had the person say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. You may not remember me, but I want to express my appreciation, my thanks to you." And they had them read the letter that they had written without knowing they would read it to the person who had helped them. And you have to see the faces when they begin the process. First, of course, there's that hesitation. But then once they begin, you literally see a change of attitude, a change of the complexion of the individual's reading. And of course, the other person on the other side of the line was equally taken by it. And then they asked the people before and after, what do you feel like? And it was a visible and palpable change in their attitude and in their mood. Because as soon as they evoked something in their lives that happened, that someone had helped them, and they expressed gratitude, it was a form of like an energy that was drawn forth. So this is already not surprising these days because it's being discussed. But I want to tell you that it really goes back thousands of years. In the tradition in which I grew up in Judaism, you actually have in the Bible many of the mitzvot, many of the commandments and the laws include gratitude. When the Jewish people come after 40 years in the wilderness, they come into the promised land, they were told that show gratitude, bring a first fruit offering called Bikurim. And indeed, that also connects to the firstborn, and in many different ways expressing thanks to God, to others, and clearly very much a significant component in any spiritual journey. So as I mentioned, most people see it as the right thing to do. That's what you do. Someone has helped you, you don't take it for granted. You definitely don't have a sense of entitlement. It's a sign of appreciation, a sign of sensitivity, not seeing life only me, and what can you do for me? It's not just taking, it's also giving. And giving in the form of gratitude, it can be in the form of a gift, it can be in the form of an expression. So it's no surprise that Thanksgiving became a national holiday due to the fact that the pilgrims, when they landed at Plymouth, they voiced that type of Thanksgiving. It became part of tradition, part of other religions, but something that everybody can embrace, whether one has faith or no faith, or however you define faith. It's something we can embrace because it's basic humanity. But there's something a lot deeper than just doing the right thing. And I'm not minimizing that at all. To teach our children, to teach ourselves, to say thank you. And as I said, not take for granted, appreciate, is a tremendous sign of not just humility, but also just decency. But there's something deeper, and that is what it does for you. What it does for you. So the mystics and the Kabbalists talk about the human spirit, just like the body has components and parts, so does the soul. Soul has parts. And one of the parts is called kindness. In Hebrew, chesed. Now, just as you need to exercise your muscles and different parts of the human body, we also need to exercise, we'll call it our faculties. And when you exercise them, they become stronger, and you become stronger in the process. When you exert yourself with your mind, with your cognitive skills, to focus, to concentrate, it's not just that you understand the idea better, your brain itself becomes worked out. It's like a workout. And the same thing, emotions. Emotional intelligence and just emotional expression. When you use emotions, they become more developed, and they access the deeper, we'll call it superconscious emotional potential that you have within you. And not just that it becomes easier, but it actually turns you into a more refined human being. So giving isn't just an obligation and the right thing to do for others. Let's talk about what it does for ourselves. And of course, the contrast is always helpful. If one does not give, if one does not acknowledge and does not thank and show gratitude, what happens is a part of your own being, a part of your own psyche and soul remains repressed to the point even of atrophy. Just like a person does not use a part of their body, not just doesn't exercise it, but it remains dormant, numb, what happens after a while? It can actually be detrimental. The same thing with our emotional and intellectual faculties. When not used, they implode essentially and will affect us. We may not see it in an obvious way. We may not even look there for the cause. So in a way, it's like breathing. If you breathe, there's an exhale and inhale. Give and take is exhale and inhale on an emotional level. What is love? Love is not a one-way street. It's not just taking, and it's not just giving. It's give and take. In a way, it's the cross-pollination between human beings as they interact. And for it to be healthy, it needs to be reciprocal. The same thing with all forms of thanksgiving, all forms of gratitude. That the giving part, if you only take, then it's like essentially, I don't want to use the word, but it's like a parasite. You take without giving back. Life, all life, healthy life, it consists of and thrives on that breathing, the exhale and inhale, the contraction and expansion of the heart, the exhale and inhale of the breath. And the same thing, look at nature. It's all about that interactivity, interaction, and cross-pollination. In the Kabbalistic terms, when it talks about the faculties, it there's a word called hitkalalut in Hebrew. Kalalut means more than just more than interaction. It also means interconnectivity. That things are intertwined with each other. There's no such thing as one without the other. There may be one dominant feature, but everything needs everything else. And the same is true in our relationship with each other when it comes to gratitude. So as such, giving back, thanking, showing appreciation is actually, besides helping the person, responding to the person and reciprocating to someone who's helped you, it's really helping yourself. You nourish and nurture and cultivate that faculty within you. And therefore, it has that impact on our beings, on our very moods and our attitudes. I've mentioned this exercise many times. It's called the Moda'ani. Moda'ani is a one-line prayer or meditation that is said every morning. It's essentially based on this principle. The word modeh means to acknowledge, to thank. And you'll find it in many traditions, and especially in the Jewish tradition, as I mentioned, in so many different ways. Besides the first fruit offering, it's also about you wake up in the morning, you don't take your life for granted, which means you don't take yourself for granted, and you don't take the gifts you received for granted. So the one-line prayer says, thank you for returning my soul to me. So of course, there's the two elements to it. The first element, as I mentioned, is the right thing to do. You're given life, you're given blessings, you appreciate them. You don't just see it, you don't have a sense of entitlement and just, I deserve everything. But secondly, that thanking is also allowing yourself to appreciate your life in a very profound way. Because you pause and think and say, okay, I'm born again in a way, refreshed in the morning, my soul has returned to me, a new day, my mandate has been renewed, my contract has been renewed. How will I use this day? So gratitude leads us to another point, which is accountability and responsibility. Why? Because it tells us that whatever comes our way, we need to do something with it. I remember reading that story where somebody was helped as a child in school. They always would fail, they were a weak student, but the teacher spent extra time with this student. The student ended up excelling and becoming a very wealthy business person. But he forgot his humble roots. That's what happens at times. A certain form of arrogance settles in, and you forget. And years later, I don't remember all the details, but I remember years later he meets his teacher. The teacher was already an older man, was impoverished, was living in a very compromised way. And he sees his teacher and he remembers. And of course he does everything possible to help his teacher. And that changes his life in his own personal way. Because we're all touched by that. When we see someone remember a favor that was done years ago, that may have changed the course of your life. It doesn't have to always be dramatic. And what it does for you is it finishes the circle. Because the taking, the benefit that you have is beautiful, but then it remains within you. And you never exhale, you never give back. And when you're able to acknowledge and appreciate that, it changes many different things. It changes the whole dynamic. And that type of, essentially, decency we spoke about, but more than that, it's a type of accountability and responsibility is really what defines what the best of we are as human beings. Just as selfishness and arrogance is captures and reflects the human at its worst, that gratitude, thanking, appreciating, the responsibility to give is the human being at his or her best. Because you realize that you're not alone. You realize you're with others. You realize that we're all interdependent, interconnected, interwoven. When you study physics, especially quantum mechanics, it's become now a known fact that the world is not a fragmented world. It's a world that is not even made up of, even the diversity is all really parts, components of one invisible tapestry. And in one way, and in some way, when you do something in one place, it affects all others instantaneously, which tells us that we are interdependent in that way. So when one helps you and you don't help back, in a way you are impeding, in a way you're almost like suffocating the breathing element of what life is all about, that give and take. The ability to recognize that we all complement each other. Each one of us has our unique strengths. Each one receives and each one gives. And in measure, when that balance is off, you may feel like you're at the moment you're gaining something, like which what takers feel, but it's not really gaining. You actually end up losing. The ones who learn to give, the ones who are givers, are frankly, in a way, receiving much more than the ones that are takers. I know it sounds paradoxical, but think about it. If the world was based on purely a type of dog eats dog, survival of the fittest, then yes, you could argue, okay, I gain and that's it, someone else loses. But if indeed we are connected, and indeed if one person is compromised, we're all compromised. And when one of us is strong, the rest becomes stronger, like a human body, an organism. It would be quite absurd to think that the right arm is competing with the left arm, the right leg with the left leg, one part of the body, one organ, one limb with another. No. If one is weak, all are weak. And strengthening one part strengthens the others. This is a message, especially today, needed more than ever in this polarized, divisive country in which we're living. And frankly, in the world, with COVID just exposing many of the rifts and many of the cracks, it's important more than ever to reclaim and re-embrace this message of Thanksgiving, which, as I said, goes back more than 400 years ago. This year will actually be 400 years, 1620 and 2020, from when the first pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock. But long before 400 years ago, humans did figure out and did unearth and discover the power of gratitude. With that in mind, let me share with you and thank you. Thank you for everything you do for us, for me. You may not even know what you do, but the mere fact that there's an interaction. Remember, there are always vibes, invisible vibes at times, and sometimes more visible than other whenever there's an interaction between people. Yes, even though technology, you may argue, we're not in the same room, we're not even in the same city, we can be across the world, but still, something is released both by me speaking and by you listening. And listening also offers an energy. It's also symbiosis. So I want to thank you and thank each one of you personally for for my growth, what I've learned from all types of human experiences, both positive ones and even painful ones. Many times learning more from painful ones than beautiful ones. And thank you for all that you are, because each of you is an indispensable note in this grand cosmic symphony. And I cannot be complete without you, and you hopefully cannot be complete without me. So I wanted to share that, and I feel good just saying that, as I said earlier, because it completes the circle, it completes the picture, that we are a give and take. And as one great statement my favorite from one of the sages, he writes, he says, more than the one who gives, more than the one who receives from the giver receives from the receiver. So in a sense, when you're talking about teacher and student, in the Talmud it says that they asked the great teacher, where did you learn most? He said, I learned much from my teachers. I learned even more from my colleagues. But above all, from my students. I learned the most from my students. So we may not appreciate in this materialistic world, we think in terms of quantity, we think in terms of acquisitions and commodities. But in fact, the fact of the matter is receiving takes a lot more energy and gives more than giving. Moonlight. You see two people who love each other stare at the moon. You don't see them staring at the sun. And the moon is a reflection of the sun. It doesn't have its own light. But in its receiving, in its reception, it gives back something that the transmitter itself cannot really fully give on its own. So in that sense, there's a give and take in a very powerful way, and I want to thank you for that. We are here, and meaningfullife.com. You can check out our entire schedule and offerings of all types, literally, virtually every day, especially in these days, this pandemic that is affecting all of us in so many different ways, to continue to become stronger and more united and more loving from within, even as some of our schedules and our lives outside, without, are somewhat disrupted. So be blessed. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Use it well, more than just the turkey, to actually think about people who perhaps you can call or contact and express gratitude. People you may not have spoken to, people you may have forgotten. It's a perfect time to do so, and there's no question that it will come back to you many times over. Be blessed, everyone. Thank you so much.